this has probably been your experience with helicopters and jets in Battlefield 6. And don't worry, you're not alone. Even some of the bigger names in the gaming space for Battlefield 6 have been struggling with aircraft in this game. And quite frankly, you can get really in-depth with these things. But what if I told you, not only is this video today going to give you all of the info and settings that you need for aircraft in this game, but we also went out of our way to create a custom aerial vehicle training range in Battlefield Portal that I'm going to show you guys how to use today. A completely custom space that spawns in multiple aircraft for you to use to fly around in without the threat of being killed by enemy opponents, and lets you crash as many times as you need to crash in order to learn how these vehicles work. See, the frustrating thing about Battlefield 6 is that out of the box there is a training range for firing your gun, but there isn't a training range for all of the various vehicles in this game that could be super complex, especially the aerial vehicles in this instance. And even more frustratingly, if you make a mistake with one of them in an actual match, you have to wait for a respawn timer, or lots of people might get annoyed at you because you crashed a helicopter and killed lots of them. And that's fine. We're going to resolve that today with this custom experience. Now, I've decided to collaborate with the guys over at Battlefield Portal Hub. Lots of links in the description down below to them. They're making lots of really cool custom experiences over the next couple of months in Battlefield Portal, and I assume that we will probably be showcasing and working with these guys quite a fair bit. And also a good content creator friend of mine, Torbis. I'm personally somebody who's really good at flying these aerial vehicles on controller, but if you're somebody who wants to use a keyboard and mouse, he's got all the devil in the details there, and he will also be featuring in this video. The start of this video is going to be about the actual training range and all of the tips and tricks, and the end of this video is going to be about how you can set it up and get into the experience. All of it will be time-stamped, so feel free to just scroll along the video as you please. Welcome to the Tactical Brits Flying Trainer. Now, don't be alarmed if you see a black screen here. If you press left or right on your D-pad, or press space or X, you should be able to reach a headquarters spawn, which is the blue icon that says headquarters. Once you hit deploy, you're going to find yourself directly inside this custom design experience that's going to give you multiple helicopters and multiple jets for you to make all the mistakes you need to make in a completely threat-free environment. There is no way for you to die in this training range unless it's quite literally you throwing your jet or helicopter into the floor, which probably is going to happen, and that's totally fine, which is why there's so many different jets and also so many different helicopters. As a running bonus as well, if somehow you manage to catastrophically destroy all of these vehicles in one way or another, you can simply press start, go down to admin controls, and simply hit restart map in order to redeploy all of the assets from scratch again. Now, this is a really cool space because the actual combat area in terms of flying out of bounds has been expanded, and you have access to every single aerial vehicle in the game in order to not only refine your flying skills and your settings, but also just to get a feel for them in terms of how they fly differently. For example, the Kestrel and the Su-25 are going to feel pretty radically different to something like the F-39E and something like the F-61. Now, granted, you can probably call them by their real military names. I, for one, will be calling some of them the Gripen fighter jet. For those of you who know, you know. But for the most part, this is just a great opportunity and a training range for you to do stupid stuff. Now, one of the cool things we've done with this training range, and a big shout out to BF Portal Hub, by the way, who helped me put this together. There's links to them in the description below, as well as their Discord if you're interested in not only the experiences that they're making, but also helping them and craft those experiences, is that we've included enemy combatants on the other side of the map with another set of vehicles. Now, you can spawn into this mode with up to 4 players per team, so you can either practice solo or invite some friends along in order to practice things like helicopter gunning, or if you're feeling really spicy, you can invite more friends along and actually 1v1 each other in dogfights with jets or 1v1 with helicopters, and essentially just have those guys on the other team. But if you fly over to the opposition base spawn here, you can actually bail out of your vehicle and land nearby. And as you can see, a symphony of 10 AI bots are opening fire on me, but not a single one of them can actually deal damage to me. They can't deal any damage to me on the floor as an infantryman, and they also cannot deal damage to me in a vehicle. Now, the reason you want to fly over here and agitate these bots is that they technically have no objective on the map, so they don't really have any tasks right now except for existing. But if you agitate them, they will start getting into the various vehicles that are available here, giving you free target practice against these enemy combatants. They'll start getting into the helicopters and vehicles and flying around, but in the vehicles, they also can't deal any damage to you. So these are effectively free targets for you to practice your various loadouts with, and the more you annoy them, the more they're going to kick up a stir and get into various vehicles and try and figure out how to counter you. So this is a completely custom space for you to try around these things and just let the bots basically target you. And once you get a bit sick of them, you can light them up with whatever packages you happen to be using in your jets and vehicles. And essentially you can deal with them, completely get rid of them, completely destroy them. They will redeploy. And then you'll have more targets to throw down some fire on. And this is going to let you get used to things like strafing runs, bombing runs, jet runs, the things that get a little bit complex, and especially the things that get low to the ground as well. As somebody who's quite an avid helicopter pilot in this game, you'll find me pretty low below radar in order to break locks. So I like to try and practice some of those runs against these bots and figure out what kind of angles I can take and just how much I can get out of a certain helicopter or jet in terms of its turning circle, in terms of its control, to see what's maneuverably possibly. Or what's maneuverably possible, should I say. I like to record all of these in one take, and I don't like editing things. For controllers, the first thing you're going to do is change some of your custom keybinds for your jets and your helicopters in order to get the best experience. Now, one of my big issues with Battlefield 6 is that the default out-of-the-box experience in terms of controller settings, in my view, is completely wrong. Now, I'm going to show you what I mean by this by heading over to the settings and changing the actual aircraft settings back to default, and you can have a quick look at what that looks like here on screen. Essentially, your throttle is tied to your left stick, but your yaw is also on your left stick. So if at any point you make any errors and you move your analog stick to the left and right whilst yawing left and right, you might accidentally be accelerating or decelerating up and down. Now, in my experience, what that means and what that results in is that players end up rolling all around the place because they're too focused on their acceleration and how they're going up and down, and not focused on the actual control of the aircraft. And this system, in my view, is completely stupid. So what you're going to do is you're going to go over to your settings here, and for transport vehicles, you're going to leave these as default. For aircraft, you're going to set your buttons to alternate. For helicopters, you're going to set your buttons to alternate. For gunners, default is fine. I use a few custom settings personally, but ultimately this is what you're going to do with all of your aerial vehicles. So again, transport, default, aircraft, alternate, helicopter, alternate, gunner is fine at default. And what this does is that in your aircraft now, and particularly for your helicopters, it completely changes this system, which means that you now have throttle associated to the triggers on your controller, your L2 and R2, whilst giving you the full amount of yaw, pitching, and lifting on your individual left and right sticks. So on your left stick, for example, with the aircraft, you now have yaw on your left stick only, and on your right stick, you have the roll. So this basically means you have a full coupled preset that's going to let you control your helicopters and your jets individually. And again, on the controller setup here for the actual helicopters, if you go to that, again, yaw is on the left stick and your roll is on the right stick, so it's very understandable and these settings work best. Now, I'm going to quickly demonstrate. We are going to go into the more finer details of helicopters and jet individually one by one, but quickly demonstrate what I mean by that. Now, if I hit my right trigger now, my R2, I immediately ascend. If I hit my left trigger now, I immediately descend. And if I don't touch my analog sticks at all, this helicopter is basically going nowhere on the power of pure physics. But my left stick now gives me the option to yaw left and right. Left stick, by going left and right here, is going to let me quickly pan my camera around and pan my entire vehicle, left and right independently of acceleration and deceleration. Now granted, we are still using actual physics, so it is going to rock backwards and forth and side to side, but this now means that I can accelerate and decelerate with the triggers, and yaw my helicopter left and right. Now your right stick is your pitching, so forwards and backwards, which basically means that you can pitch your helicopter forward, hit accelerate, and bang, suddenly you're going really fast forward, as fast as humanly possible. Go too far forward and you'll hit the floor, go too far backwards and you will immediately hit what's the basic consideration of something like an air brake. And again, it's an independent control, so forward tilts you downwards, backwards tilts you upwards. And what this means now is that combining your yaw and combining your pitch, you effectively have full 360 control of how this helicopter operates. It's a really simplified system, and it's going to be a little confusing at first, but once you start combining the two sticks together, you can kind of really do some nice maneuvers. So for example, I like to pitch my helicopter really down low to get low to the floor, and then combining accelerate and decelerate, because I've already pitched my helicopter at the angle I want it, I now just need to control the overall acceleration and deceleration of the helicopter. helicopter. I accelerate and tilt it slightly backwards when I get too low to the floor, and I decelerate it and point it upwards if I want to slightly get lower to the ground. And just give yourself some time. Use these new controls, these alternate controls, which I feel are better, and fly around some. And you're going to get to learn how the yaw system and the roll system is much better on independent sticks for a controller. The same applies to the jets as well, but generally speaking, these controller settings are exactly what you need to use.
Hello everyone and welcome to my segment of this video, which will be focused on mouse and keyboard for the aircrafts. The first keybind that I will be changing, it is the third-person aircraft camera roll. If you have this on, it means that your camera will roll with the aircraft, which can be quite difficult in dogfight. I think it absolutely makes it worse, and I will show you guys what that looks like in just a minute. The other setting is probably the most important one for vehicles. This is for both helicopters and jets. It's very important that you guys actually do rebind these keys, as it's very difficult to aim at the same time as moving with your mouse. What I do change is pitch down and pitch up. Pitch down should be on space and pitch up is on left control. The reason I change these keybinds is so that if I run out of mouse pad space, I don't actually have any issues with dogfighting. I'm going to show you guys that right now. Usually you'll actually run out of mouse pad space if you just keep going this way. It might look smooth, but it absolutely is not. I can have my hand off my mouse and I'm still moving. It's the same with like doing left control, which means that you will be going downwards like this. I'm using pitch up to go up, left control to go down. It is just a much better way of movement than actually moving with your mouse, while you can also holding V to look around while going. It's just a good way to use your vehicles, and I think it's the best way to actually fly them in the game as well. A lot of people have been doing this since Battlefield 3. It is the best way of actually keybinding them.
Now, we're going to talk about the physics and general tips and tricks I have for how you as a helicopter pilot can achieve the best possible control with a helicopter shortly. But for the most part, if I'm being brutally honest with you guys, I can teach you 101 different maneuvers and give you some tips and tricks on the physics of a helicopter, which we will do, but you're actually going to learn the most just by flying around this range. You're going to learn what this is capable of, how accelerating and decelerating has an effect on your vehicle, and get a feel for the weight and feel of how these aircraft handle. Now, one of the biggest issues in any game, not just Battlefield, is that I can tell you all these things in terms of how they're supposed to operate, but that doesn't really mean anything until you actually get a feel for it yourself. It's a bit like driving a car, right? Like, you can't exactly explain the feeling of a Ferrari to somebody who has only ever driven something like a Fiat 500. You know, it's two entirely different worlds, and I would explain it the same in Battlefield 6. Until you actually get hands-on with a helicopter and fly it around unhindered for a while, it's a little bit different and a little bit difficult to explain how you can use it in certain ways. But once you've gotten competent in a helicopter and once you've gotten it off the floor, the biggest thing that applies, and this also applies to jets as well, are your two forms of evasion. And that is number 1, flares, and number 2, below radar. Now, in Battlefield 6, you are going to be locked on by everything. Anti-aircraft tank, people on the floor who happen to use anti-vehicle launchers predominantly for the sky, like Stingers. And these are very problematic, and these can take you out and make it a very long day for you. Now, your first form of evasion is the basic flare system, but it's really important that you never pop flares until you actually have an incoming missile. More experienced players like myself in Battlefield are going to hold on to a target lock on an aerial vehicle until it pops flares, because if it pops flares before we fire, I can then fire immediately once the flare effect is ended and take out that opponent. So you're going to hold on for as long as possible, and once you hear a lock and you see the lock come in, don't actually pop the flare until you see incoming labeled on your screen. Once you see incoming and hear the associated beep, then you can pop your flare. And once you have fired your flares, it's really important that you realize you are now vulnerable. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get low to the ground and decelerate, because that's going to give you below radar, which is the second form of evasion. Flying low to the floor, I believe it's under 30 meters, is going to keep you unable to be target locked by opponents. Now, this does open you up to another threat of being RPG'd or hit by a tank, so moving quickly is really important and really vital, but for the most part, this is the second best form of evasion. Alternatively, if you're not feeling confident about flying low to the floor yet, the best thing you could do is just hit a hard turn away from your current location and head towards the edge of the map out of bounds or towards your spawn. And this is going to keep you away from those target locks which previously had the range and distance on you. If it's an enemy vehicle though, like another enemy helicopter or an enemy jet, they're going to be closing the distance on you. So in that scenario, your only solution is to get low to the floor, break the target lock and re-engage, and move around fairly quickly. Next, we're actually going to talk about the physics of a helicopter and how you can get the most out of it. Now, there are two really important things for you to understand about a helicopter in Battlefield 6, and I'll also do the same for jets too. But the first thing is that acceleration and deceleration is the largest impacting factor of how this vehicle is going to handle and the amount of maneuverability you can get out of it. And it's kind of no different to driving a car in that respect. You can think of it as being the same as braking in a car. If you're braking in a car and you build more traction, you get more turning out of the vehicle that you happen to be using. Whereas if you're going faster, the actual amount of turning and the volume you have gets a little bit more tricky because you're going at such speed. The same applies to helicopters in Battlefield 6. If you're accelerating and tilting downwards, you are still going to have a pretty decent amount of control in tilting your vehicle in terms of where it's going. As you can see here, I'm not really struggling too much with maneuvering my helicopter left and right and making sharp banking turns. But if you hit decelerate on the helicopter, you can see just how quickly that turn can accelerate because you're actually moving closer to the ground, and because you aren't accelerating and you aren't using upward force, you turn a little bit quicker. So if I want to make a sharp banking turn to the right and I'm accelerating, it takes a little while. But if I decelerate and make the same banking turn, it moves a lot quicker because I'm plummeting towards the ground a lot faster. So that's a really important feature to note. The second thing is just that in terms of gaining acceleration and getting off of the floor, there is physics to that. So what I mean by this is that if you decide to pump the brakes and decelerate and slowly move towards the ground, decelerating is substantially faster than accelerating. This will likely change when the Little Bird eventually releases in Battlefield 6 because Little Birds have a lot of upward thrust and can get off the ground really quickly, but for the most part, decelerating is really, really rapid. It's going to take me a really long time to gain elevation into the skybox as a helicopter, but if I pump the brakes right now, look at how quickly I rapidly descend into the floor. And once you start descending into the floor, it's worth remembering that you have to accelerate again in order to cancel out the physics that's plummeting you towards the ground. There is a real physics system in Battlefield 6. This isn't just some random toy system. So when I start plummeting to the floor and decelerating, I need to hit that accelerate early to stop me from hitting the floor because it's going to take more time to go upwards as opposed to going downwards. The next thing about your attack helicopter is just understanding the weight of this vehicle. Once you've gotten to grips to rolling or yawing your vehicle in any given direction, and again, yaw is on your left and right stick, roll is on your right analog stick, or if you're using keyboard and mouse, the binds will be different. It's worth remembering that at this point, it's all about the feel. It's all about the physicality of your vehicle at this point and understanding what is achievable. I would liken flying one of these attack helicopters to flying a van or a bus. It's probably the only way I could really describe it because it's got enough weight to it that momentum is really impactful as to how much you can achieve in terms of turning. Little birds are completely different because, again, they're little birds, they're very nimble, but these things have physics to them that make them slower, that make them harder to maneuver, and generally make them a little bit more weighty with their controls. So you'll find if I'm rotating, for example, around this building, that I actually like to stay in a first-person view for this. Now, you do lose the spatial awareness of your tail of your helicopter, so if you accidentally, for example, decide to start flying upwards and catch it on the edge of a building or on the bottom of a crane, you are going to get John Cena'd. But on the flip side of that, it gives you a lot more presence of mind and awareness as to the actual physic momentum changes that your helicopter is experiencing. So as I'm banking around these corners here, and I'm yawing primarily here, left and right, you can see that when I accelerate and decelerate, especially when I decelerate, in the first-person view, I can really see just how much of an impact that pumping of the brake is bringing me closer to the floor. And that stuff is really important because turning around a corner and pumping the brakes is a really fast way to achieve that turn, but the actual physical momentum that you lose from doing that and how quickly you might accidentally find yourself in the floor is something that's hard to judge unless you're in the first-person view. You can still see it roughly in the third-person view, but you become so spatially unaware of how close to the ground you are sometimes, I find, that it's a little bit tricky to get used to. It's time to talk jets in Battlefield 6, and again, with the settings that I talked about earlier, you guys are going to have a really nice setup with fighter jets in this game. With the yaw system being set on your left stick, allowing you to yaw left and right, making those fine aim adjustments, and the actual pitch and roll, pitching up and down, and rolling entirely being on your right stick, which again, a better system that gives you full fine-tuned control with accelerate and decelerate being assigned to the triggers. Now, irregardless of like you're using your controller or you using a keyboard and mouse, there is a basic fundamental understanding with jets that you need to come to in Battlefield 6. The first thing about evasion, which I mentioned with helicopters in terms of flaring and staying below radar, applies to jets too. But the biggest thing with jets is how they turn and also their motion, and also just generally speaking building up speed. Now, if you really want to get into the real nitty-gritty details of fighter jets, I'm going to leave a link below to Silk. Silk is without a doubt one of the best fighter jet pilots in the game and probably has a lot more expert design controls. But for the basic stuff and for understanding how these things work, speed is the weapon for jets. And what I mean by that is that whilst maximum speed actually makes jets a little bit tricky to turn and a little bit tricky to get mobility out of, there is effectively a point where a certain type of speed is going to give you the best turning in a jet. Now, there is an official calculation for calculating the exact speed required to get the best turning out of a jet in terms of banking all the way around in one direction. But generally speaking, I always say to people, as a basic rule in a jet, if you want to make a maneuver, especially in terms of dogfighting or quickly, sharply moving around a building or an object, build up to maximum speed as much as possible using that thruster and afterburner, and then as you go into the turn, brake gently and then accelerate again. So essentially, any turn is a combination of building up the speed and then boom, brake gently and accelerate again. And this is going to give you the tightest possible turning that you can get out of a fighter jet. There is a lot more nuance to this subject, and there is a lot more discussion around what you could do to achieve the best turning circle from a jet. But basically speaking, that is the quickest way to achieve that. Now, with certain types of fighter jets in this game, you could do something even wackier to get a really tight turning circle out of it, and that's called thrust vectoring. Now, essentially, there is a whole, I could write a 3-page document on how this works, but at a basic level, you're going to activate your thruster and hold it down, whatever that thrust button will be. For me on a controller, it's L3. And then as you go into a turn, you can tap the brake, and it's going to give you effectively the equivalent of an air brake. So for example, if I'm got somebody on my ass and they're chasing me on my tail, I'm going to thrust brake upwards, and it's effectively going to do a drift, which is going to stop somebody from chasing me or make them fly straight past me. This is very much like a Top Gun style maneuver, hit brake, bang, all of a sudden I've done some sort of air equivalent of a Tokyo drift and they fly clean past me. But you can actually use this as well to get a tighter turning circle out of the game. So you click into that afterburner button, you start your turn, and then you spam accelerate and decelerate, and you can actually, by spamming accelerate and decelerate really quickly, effectively get a really tight turning circle out of it. I haven't mastered this maneuver yet. It's really challenging to do, and as you do that, you will start plummeting towards the floor because you effectively lose thrust. But hold down that afterburner and then boom, accelerate, decelerate, and you can get a really tight angle turn as fast as humanly possible. Really helpful maneuver, really useful to do in Battlefield 6, and if you're in a really tight spot where somebody is just unable to be shaken off your ass, again, decelerate, accelerate really quickly with that thrust vector button enabled, and you will probably get the tight turning circle you want. This is a really advanced maneuver. It's something that I'm not even good at yet, but you can do it. It is possible. You can get the most out of this. Again, decelerate and accelerate. And you can see just how quickly that jet is juddering in the air to kind of get that turning circle achieved if I spam those buttons really quickly. But again, you progressively lose that acceleration. You start moving towards the floor. But for the most part, that's about it with jets. Speed is your friend. Speeding into a turn is your friend and getting that subtle brake to get the best turning out of it. And of course, you have the thrust vectoring options if you want something a little bit more advanced, like a fast brake in the sky, to deal with an enemy opponent. And those are the two biggest things I can mention. Now, generally speaking with jets, the biggest tip I can give all of you today in terms of mastering this is get comfortable flying close to things. Get into this training range and start flying close to the floor. Yes, things like trees are going to blow you up if you get a little too close, but don't be afraid to get close to the floor. Don't be afraid of the ground in this game. Don't be afraid of buildings and objects, because ultimately, if you get target locked and you've popped your flares and you've used all of your tricks, it's actually physical objects like hillsides and buildings and things like this annoying telephone pole. They're actually going to block incoming projectiles from you. You know, you can't just fly around in the sky at, several thousand feet and expect not to be blown up. Getting low to the ground is not only really effective for things like dropping bombing runs, but also really effective for things like avoiding and evading missiles. The other big thing that I would mention for jets as well is never get slow in enemy territory. I see so many people get close to the enemy spawn or the enemy objectives or the enemy base, and they start slowing down, or they're admiring the view, or maybe they think they can outturn a jet by slowing down. That's not the case. Speed is your friend. Staying mobile to get away from options and enemies is your friend, and you absolutely want to stay on top of that as much as possible. If I'm near the enemy spawn, or I'm near a place where enemy combatants or AAs could be, I'm staying as fast and nimble as humanly possible. I'm only slowing down if necessary, or if because I'm trying to do a really tight turning maneuver and get something achieved. Other than that, I'm keeping maximum velocity for as fast as humanly possible. Now, if you want to get into this custom experience and get into the training range whilst making the settings adjustments that we're going to show you in this video today, it's very simple. You're going to scroll down to the community tab, hit search experiences, and then type in code 8v8g. Now, at the moment, this experience is going through validation and eventually will be published. And when you search 8v8g, it will just appear the Tactical Brits Flying Trainer. And for those of you who don't want to wait around and you aren't willing to wait for this experience to be published, I'm going to show you how you can host this experience right now with you and your friends without having to wait for this official publication from the guys over at Battlefield. Now, at the time of making this video, the experience that I've shown you, 8v8g, which you can enter in game to play, is currently pending process in terms of being published for the wider player base. But if you want to get into it right now and try it for yourself with you or just you and your friends, you can still do that on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC, but you will need a PC with a web browser in order to configure it. The first thing you're going to do is head on over to portal.battlefield.com and hit Start Creating. You're then going to have to log in potentially to your EA account. I'm already signed into mine, but make sure it's the account that is associated with your copy of Battlefield 6. Don't accidentally end up logging into an account that isn't associated with it, because otherwise the experiences won't show in your game. And I've made this a super simple process for you guys. You're simply going to hit import from file. You can already see that my experience is already here pending publication, but if you hit import from file, you can then download in the link in the description this file here, the Tactical Brits Flying Trainer.json file. You're going to click that, it's going to load up everything for you. You're simply going to go to publish and rename it whatever you want to rename it. Let's call it Ben's Flying, and then go to step 2, change to whatever you want, Ben's Flying, hit create new, and bang, the experience is going to be saved. And you'll then be able to go back to your projects and see that that experience is currently there, available for you in the game. Now, if your experience doesn't show up in the game, even though it is saved, simply hit publish. It is going to put the game through a full publishing experience, and it will mean that this will now show up to the general public, but you can still host private servers with this. Then, if you hit publish, you should see it in game. If you then go back into Battlefield 6 and head down to the community tab again, you can hit My Experiences. And the one that I've published, or am in the process of publishing, is already here. You click on it, you can then go host it, and you can make it a private server if you so want, and even host it locally on your own system. Now, making it private is highly recommended, especially with a password, so you don't get randomers joining you, and it's as simple as that. Boom, you can find yourself in the custom flying trainer as easy as 1, 2, 3. So folks, I hope that was really helpful in terms of learning a little bit more about flying vehicles and giving you a custom space especially to make those mistakes and learn these things. This is a really tricky game in terms of complexity of flying, and you're going to make mistakes from day one. One of the biggest things I would always say is I don't like to complain about players and blueberries, as we call them in Battlefield, flying around and blowing up helicopters because, everybody's got to learn. And the idea of this video was to give you guys a safe space that you could learn and you could try and find out these things for yourself without necessarily impacting an active multiplayer lobby. Jets and helicopters in this game could be really fun, really rewarding, and quite frankly, as a result of something like this air brake, they just look fucking cool too. So having a space to kind of learn how these things work and learn how to get the most out of them and how you can be effective and deal with enemy opponents is its own game within a game in Battlefield 6. And again, I'm going to leave a link down below to Silk. I think he's a fantastic content creator and he covers these stuff in like really intense details. So if you're somebody who wants to learn a little bit more about fighter jets, I would definitely go check him out. And also a big shout out again to the Battlefield Portal Hub guys for helping me make this custom experience and give you guys something very specific that you could use for jets and helicopters in Battlefield 6 and learn these things and make these errors. I think it's really important to have. I think it's going to be big for the community. So make sure you share this video with your friends and make sure you drop a subscribe as well.